As opening our event, I would invite here Mr. Jan Spaiders, who is the director of the Department of Higher Education, Science and Innovation at our Ministry of Education and Science. So this event is organized by our ministry together with Biomedicine Center. So here's
yes, good morning everyone. It is a pleasure to be here, and today, this morning, we are welcoming Latvia to a European Molecular Conference and European Molecular Laboratory colleagues. And Latvia is rapidly progressing towards full membership in both international organizations after a positive voting this June. Overall, life sciences ranging from basic research to applied research to medicine and other related fields always has been an essential part of Latvian research landscape. In this area, international collaboration, which in other research fields have been a relatively recent trend, here it has had a very long-standing tradition, also with high quality when we compare ourselves not just with other research areas, but with other countries in life sciences as well. The publication impact in the field of biomedicine is amongst the higher in our research community. Overall, we have invested more than 60 million euros in research infrastructures in biomedical fields in Latvia in recent years. And for a successful research activity on all of these upgraded infrastructures, we are looking forward towards collaborating with excellent centers like EMBL. We are looking for networking and exchange for support that is offered by EMBC. Ministry of Education and Science is confident that the investment into collaboration with both EMBC and EMBL will be a very good one. We are seeing that the very rapid progress of biomed industries in Lithuania, for example, where EMBL is very essential at promoting excellent innovation. We are sure that Latvia also has its strengths and international cooperation, so we can optimally foster our excellent niches within this field. I wish you an excellent and a knowledgeable seminar today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jānis. Yeah, important point. We have in parallel Life Sciences Baltic in Lithuania. A lot of people are visiting it. And now I will ask to give a short intro by Jānis Kloviņš, who is in fact the person from our, let's say, scientific community who has been all the time in various positions the promoter, yeah, in participation in EMBC, EMBL. So Jānis, for short words for you.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I've known EMBO and EMBL for already some time. Actually, my first time I got into contact was when I applied for the short-term visit to Uppsala University, I don't know, 20 years ago. So it was successful. So I may say that. So this is a really great thing to be part of. And now, when we are becoming the full members, then we have all the other opportunities, not only these short-term visits. But apart from that, I think it's I also have evidence how EMBL has evolved during these years. I'm really fond of the new program, because what I see, it's really covering much more larger areas than it did before. Not only the molecular biology, it goes into and this ecosystem approach where you really see these elements where molecular biology can be used in different areas of everyday life of many people. I think it's a right way to do, and I think it's really amazing. And so you may look to look at this program, and I think everybody can find something for him to be used there. So, but apart from that, I also have some experience already with the support that EMBL provides. For example, we applied together for the EU grant, and I never seen such a careful support. So we were coordinators, but still the EMBL really provided the knowledge of their people, and then also advices on the proposal composition and so on. So this is something that really works, I would say. So and today I guess we are here to understand what we can more gain from EMBO, from EMBL, and I really encourage everybody to use these possibilities, starting from the young researchers and also ending with the more experienced researchers. So yeah, welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Jānis. And I would like to invite now Bettina Tube, who will give an overview of all this alphabet, EMBO, EMBC, EMBL. So this very, very specific molecular biology language. And I would also invite our colleagues really to ask questions afterwards about the system of scholarships, of system of how it functions, also for collaboration options through EMBC, for instance, with countries where we don't have direct possibilities to cooperate. This all will be presented by Bettina. So, and you must somehow take the most convenient place.
Yeah.
But I think you can sit also, no?
I'm okay standing.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. So, all right. So welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining, and thanks to Uldis and Jānis and everybody who's been organizing this event. It's really great to be here, and we're really looking forward to having Latvian scientists on board, both at EMBO and EMBL. So I work for EMBO, and indeed I'm going to explain a little bit this funny alphabet of letters in a moment. So for now, a little bit about EMBO. So EMBO is an organization of leading life scientists that promotes excellence in the life sciences in Europe and beyond. And we try to really help build a research environment where scientists can do the best work that they can. So we try to take a little bit away all these worries about funding and bureaucracy and really help science thrive. Here's an overview of our programs and activities. I'll go into that in a moment, but first a tiny little bit about history. So EMBO is actually the oldest of all the organizations. We were founded in 1964 by some molecular biologists in Europe who felt that molecular biology needed a boost. So they saw that people were moving to the US to do science, and they wanted to put something up against that. So they created this European Molecular Biology Organization, and at the time that the organization had two goals. One of them was to promote scientific training and exchange throughout Europe, and that's still what we do to this day. And then there was a second goal, which was they wanted something like CERN, but for molecular biology. So the second goal of EMBO, when it was established, was to build a European laboratory for the life sciences. And that was achieved in 1974 when EMBL was founded. In between those years, they realized that in order to achieve these goals, they needed money. So EMBO had an initial startup grant from the Volkswagen Foundation in Germany, but they needed a more sort of institutional, broader-based support. So in 1969, the European Molecular Biology Conference was created. And that's the body of our member states, which provides the main amount of funding for EMBO and our work. So we have at the moment 30 member states, very soon to be 31 once Latvia finalizes the ratification process. And once that's achieved, so we're hoping that by January 2024, all Latvian scientists will have full access to all our programs and activities. So EMBC funds our programs, but we also have another very important aspect in EMBO, which is our EMBO members. So EMBO is a slightly strange beast in that it's a membership organization, but it's also a science funder, and we have a publishing arm, which you'll hear about later from my colleague Jeva. But the EMBO membership is really what carries us through. So these are elected scientists. There are now over 2,000 of them in Europe, and above 150 associate members throughout the entire world. And these scientists are nominated and elected by their peers in an annual peer election. So we're also hoping that in one of the next membership elections, we can start welcoming Latvian EMBO members into the fold. So this is the 2023 membership cohort. Every year about 60 new members and about 10 new associate members join EMBO. And they are really the people who do all the work on our evaluation committees and who sit on the EMBO Council and direct the direction that EMBO's work is going in. So now to our programs and activities, which is, I guess, what you are all interested in today. Our sort of biggest program in terms of the amount of funding that we provide is the postdoctoral fellowship program. This is a program for people up to 2 years post-PhD, where they can get 2 years of funding to carry out a postdoc project in a different country. So international mobility is a prerequisite for the EMBO postdoctoral fellowships. And they're really, so what happens is that EMBO gives the grant to the receiving institution, to the host institution of the postdoctoral fellow, and then that institution gives the fellow a contract with full social benefits. I won't pretend that 2 years are enough to do a postdoc these days. But what we find is that usually the scientists are able to use the EMBO fellowship as a jumping board to go on to another grant or to find a position to support the rest of their postdoctoral work. We also have, and this is what Yanis was already referring to, the scientific exchange grants. They're short-term grants where you can go for up to 3 months, or in some cases even up to 6 months, to a lab somewhere else to learn something new and bring it back to your home lab. So this is something that's really interesting for example, PhD students or also for postdocs, but also we're open to applications from core facility staff. For example, if you want to go to a core facility somewhere else or to a lab somewhere else where they have instrumentation or they have a technique that you need in the home lab and you don't have it yet, you can learn it there and bring it back. So in that case, for the scientific exchange grants, we do have a requirement that you go back to your home lab for a few months afterwards to really implement that technique and that new knowledge also there. The scientific exchange grants have a relatively high success rate. So if it's a solid project and the reasoning behind it makes sense, then usually those grants will also be funded. Another program that we have is the EMBO Young Investigator program. So the EMBO Young Investigator Network encompasses 3 sort of groups. We've got the EMBO Young Investigators, we've got installation grantees, and we've got global investigators. I won't talk too much about the installation grantees and the global investigators because these are only available to a subset of countries. But the Young Investigator program will be open for applications from Latvian scientists as soon as the joining process is fully complete. And this is basically for young group leaders. It's a networking program. So this is a program where you don't get a lot of money, you get some money, but you get some really nice benefits. So it covers conference funding, it covers an annual Young Investigators meeting. They have sectoral meetings where they meet with, different, so we just had one, for example, on structural biology. It provides training, so you receive access to EMBO training courses on lab leadership, on project management, and not just for yourself, but also for your lab. So there's a Young Investigator PhD course that's aimed at the PhD students of the Young Investigator Lab. So this is a really interesting program that just provides that little bit extra for young group leaders sort of start into their group leader career. Another interesting program that we have is the Courses and Workshops program. So EMBO funds workshops that are sort of conferences on latest developments in the life sciences. We also fund practical courses that provide training on new techniques. And actually, I brought a bunch of EMBO events posters that are outside. If there are any left, you can pick them up and you can see all the range of events that we're funding this and next year. So these are interesting for both people who want to organize them and people who want to attend them, right? So you can apply for funding for your conference to organize it, and we provide travel grants, for example, to the organizers. But also, of course, if you're a scientist who wants to attend one of those workshops, one of those events, I'd really encourage you to have a look at our website or have a look at the event poster outside to see what's available and where you can go. We also, I sort of mentioned this earlier in the Young Investigator program, we have a training arm. It's called EMBO Solutions, and they provide lab leadership courses that help people sort of start their career as a group leader again. You know, if you're a scientist, you're usually not trained in people management, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the position where you need to lead a research group. So you've got students, you've got technicians, you've got all kinds of things that you need to manage that you didn't need to manage before when you were maybe a postdoc or a PhD student working on your science. So the lab leadership courses really help with that. We've got 2 flavors of those, one for advanced postdocs and one for young group leaders. And they cover things like communication, team development, conflict management, but also negotiation and project management, which are all things that start to become important once you start your own lab. We also have other research skills courses that we're constantly developing and expanding on things like research integrity, planning and writing papers, but also giving scientific presentations and the peer review process. And for those especially, we work a lot also drawing on the experience of our EMBO editors who help co-train those courses. And maybe Eva will say a little bit about that as well later in her presentation. So again, if you're interested in those, please go onto the website and look for them. You can see the next deadlines that are coming up, and there we have both online versions as well as in-person versions of those courses that you can sign up for. EMBO also does some work in the area of science policy. So basically what we do mostly is we analyze issues that are of interest in the policy space to life scientists to make their work easier, to make it easier to cope with a regulatory framework. And we do that through policy workshops, through papers that are published either as white papers in our website or in other scientific publications. And basically, at the moment, the policy work focuses on sort of 4 main areas. One is research integrity, to foster the responsible conduct of research. And in that context, EMBO provides fora on responsible research, where somebody from EMBO, our policy team, will come and provide information to institutes and institutes heads about good, responsible research practice. We also require research integrity training of all our grantees. So if you get an EMBO postdoc fellowship or if you become an EMBO Young Investigator, we ask you to take some training in research integrity that we provide to our grantees for free as part of the grant. We've also done a lot of work in the area of open science, and that's both on the sort of policy side, but also in the implementation side. So we've got a few projects like Source Data that really aims to make the data behind figures and the data behind scientific publications more easily discoverable. And we've got an early evidence base that's focused on making preprints, of which there are just so many out there that it becomes really difficult to sort of assimilate them and categorize them in a scientist's head. You can't possibly read through all of them. So our early evidence base tries and help with that. The policy program also has done a lot of work and is doing a lot of work on research assessment. We're a co-founder of the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, and we're a member of COARA, which is a group that works on research assessment at the European level. So we just co-founded a working group within COARA on referee credit that aims to really think about how we can value all the extra work that scientists put into refereeing papers or refereeing grant applications, how that can be valued more and how it can be incorporated into when scientists are being assessed, for example, for grants or for positions, to make sure that that chunk of time, that's quite a big chunk of time for a lot of scientists, is more recognized and more valued in the research assessment process. And last but not least, EMBO has been doing some work in the area, mostly up to now, of gender roles and women in science, but we're now starting to branch out into equity more widely, to look into how we can help make science a more equitable environment for people from all sorts of different backgrounds. I very briefly want to mention our global activities. So EMBO has cooperation agreements with currently four and a half countries, I would say. So we work with India and Singapore, who are associate members of EMBC, and with Chile and Taiwan, where we have cooperation agreements. And scientists from these countries not only have access to our programs and activities, but also you, as researchers from Europe, will be able to use your grants to, for example, go to any of these countries. So if you want to, for example, apply for a scientific exchange grant to do research in Taiwan, you can. And I think that's something that's really interesting for the European research community as well. I said 4.5 countries because we've just signed a memorandum of cooperation with the Japan Science and Technology Agency, where some scientists funded by JST will shortly also be able to tap into our network. So that's something to watch out for, and that's coming up in the very near future. I will skip over these two slides and use them as a sort of segue into the next presentation, where my colleague Yeva, who is a senior editor at one of our journals, EMBO Journal, will talk about publishing with EMBO. But before I do that, I will open the floor for questions, if there are any. If you have very sort of detailed questions about one of our specific programs, you can ask them either now, but we'll also have breakout sessions later on where you can come and chat to me and ask if you're interested specifically in one of our programs. So thanks very much. And yeah, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Approximately for various, let's say, the scholarship schemes and so on.
Okay. Yeah, so for the postdoctoral fellowships, the success rate is usually around 15%, so it's a very competitive program. For the scientific exchange grants, I already mentioned the success rate is quite a lot higher. It's usually around 50%, so 50. And then for the young investigator program, I'm actually not quite sure right now, but I think it's also somewhere in the range of between 13 and 15%. So they are competitive programs, but I would really encourage you not to let that discourage you from applying. Yeah, it's worth it. You learn a lot even through the application process. Or even if you go on to the interview stage and you're not chosen, the feedback that we get is that people actually really already get a lot of out of the interview process and the application process, even if they don't end up being funded by EMBO.
The second question I have here is you have also some kind of, let's say, activities which you can offer? Let's say, not a full scholarship, but let's say, kind of visiting activity, or this is rather for EMBL?
So we have the scientific exchange grants, the short-term mobility grants that are sort of a little bit in that direction. But since EMBO doesn't have facilities itself, because we're more a mobility funder and publisher, I think what you mean is, I think EMBL, the facilities at EMBL are sort of more relevant for that.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I have a more general question. The members of EMBO are the scientific organizations, right? So I don't have to, as an individual, be a member. If Latvia joins, then I'm eligible for any of these programs, right?
Right. So yes, interesting structural question. So yes, if you're a scientist in Latvia, once your country is a member of the EMBC, then you as a scientist are eligible to apply for any of our programs. So absolutely no worries about that. The EMBO membership are elected scientists, and it actually, the most that you get out of membership, to be honest, is that we make you work for us. So if you're an elected member, you get to sit on committees and help us select students and postdocs. But you don't need to be an EMBO member in order to be eligible for our grants, no.
Technically, when people can start apply, January 1st, or if some courses are already at the beginning of next year, so and deadline for application is now.
Yes, so you can already, as a participant, you can already attend EMBO events right now, because there it doesn't matter that if you're in an EMBC member state or not. So you can, even if you're from, say, South Korea, you could come and attend an EMBO workshop or course. Doesn't matter. But for our funding programs, I think it's going to be January the 1st. Yeah.
Because we are now in this not ratification but approval process, but there are no essential problems with this, because for Latvia it is decided by the government, and this is a formal side. There are not any risks that it will somehow fail. Therefore, I will really encourage you that you really look for the deadlines and so. And deadlines are visible on the web page. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the earliest upcoming deadline that would be relevant for Latvian scientists would be the next courses and workshops deadline, which is March the 1st. So if you want to put in an application for event funding, then I would really encourage you to already start thinking about it and starting to look at the eligibility criteria and what you need, because event planning needs to be already quite advanced at the time that you put in your application. So if you want to apply for the March the 1st deadline, then now is the time to start thinking about it and starting to get your event together for that. And then we have the spring evaluation round of the postdoctoral fellowships. I'm not entirely sure when the cutoff date is right now, but it's also sometime in spring 2024. So if you're planning to do a postdoc abroad, then you can also already start looking and start planning your application for that.
Yes, and also for postdocs, actually we are planning also, and it is already in the regulations of Cabinet of Ministers elaborated, a postdoc program here in Latvia. We had also in previous planning period actually a pretty huge postdoc program here in Latvia. But if the postdoc is here in Latvia, they can have up to half a year secondment abroad. Yeah, so this will somehow work, yeah, with the EMBC, EMBL, yeah, system.
Yes, and also if you're a group leader or a professor and you want to recruit somebody into Latvia from abroad, they can also apply for the EMBO postdoctoral fellowships to come here. So you should take that also into consideration when you sort of look for funding sources for your postdocs.
Okay. So apparently no more questions, yeah? Okay, we will have also at the end of the event also the possibility to ask questions in a closer circle, yeah, so this will be also the possibility.
Yeah, and also if any questions come up later, my email address is up here, just, you know, send me an email and ask, and if I don't know the answer to your specific question, I'll forward it on to one of my colleagues who will know the answer. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, now I will invite Eva Gailīte, who will present actually the scientific publishing side of this, let's say, big EMB, yeah, and something after that system, yeah? Okay, Eva.
All right, so I'm Eva. It's good to be back in a bit more professional capacity this time. I'm senior scientific editor at the EMBO journal, and I will tell you a bit about publishing activities that EMBO does and what is our part in promoting different concepts that EMBO is interested in, such as open science and research integrity. And this doesn't work for me. Okay, so you can see that there are 5 journals under EMBO Press. We have started a long time ago, 40 years ago, the first journal was founded. This is the EMBO journal. There are 2 journals that focus on very broad topics in molecular, cellular, and also organismal biology, such as the EMBO journal and EMBO reports. We look for novel, exciting findings that will be of interest to a broad range of scientists. Then there are 2 more specialized journals or more focused journals, such as EMBO Molecular Medicine. They look at work in the interface between molecular biology and clinical sciences. So there has to be direct and clear impact in how patients are treated for the publications that are submitted there or published there. Then there's Molecular Systems Biology Journal, and our most recent newcomer is Life Science Alliance. It is published in collaboration with 2 other academic publishers, Cold Spring Harbor University Press and Rockefeller University Press. And this is a very broad and general journal looking to publish manuscripts that will be of relevance and interest to a particular scientific field. So it's a bit less selective journal. The other 4 have rather high selectivity that I will mention later. EMBO Journal and EMBO Reports were hybrid open access so far, so we had both publishing models, open access and subscription. Starting from 2024, we will be moving to a full called open access for all the journals at EMBO Press. What might be of interest to Latvian scientists is that the costs are covered by EMBO for EMBC country scientists that are publishing in EMBO Press journals. So this could be helpful if you decide to publish with any of these journals. As it was already mentioned, we are moving a bit more into ecology and evolution topics as well. So we are going with the wave of interest in these topics also for EMBL and EMBO. And there are papers such as first confirmation for very exciting findings that could also fit to EMBO reports. Our journals are run by professional editors, so you might know that there are 2 modes of publication process. Sometimes there could be academic editors that are active scientists. In our case, these are editors that are fully dedicated to this publication and selection process. Of course, we do it in close collaboration with our editorial advisory board, which are eminent scientists in their field and guide our selection process there. And we also interact for evaluation of the manuscripts, of course, with the broader scientific community who are then our reviewers and provide detailed input on manuscripts that we consider. What do we select for? It's a bit nebulous. Of course, it's always novelty and quality, but as we know, this is a bit in the eye of the beholder. There are lots of other factors that come in, such as broad relevance, what is the scope of the study, is it how deep the analysis is, if we know very well what is going on. This would be a good EMBO journal paper if the finding is exciting, but we don't quite yet know how all the factors come together. Maybe EMBO reports is more something to consider. As you can see, the acceptance rate is quite tight. Life Science Alliance has a 50% acceptance rate, so this is a more broad and general journal. However, we make up for it to make life a bit more comfortable to our authors that submit to us. So there are lots of publication policies that we hope are of interest, also to scientists that might consider us in comparison to other rather general journals. So we are a not-for-profit publisher. All our income is going to EMBO programs to support fellowships and different grants, and you can look up our finances online, so there's a clear breakdown what goes where. We offer different features that could be of interest, such as double-blind review, in which case not only the authors don't know what the referees are, but the referees also don't know who the authors are. Some people are interested in this. There's mixed reports whether this is actually helpful for the authors, but some people would like to use it, and we offer it. I will talk a bit more about open review process and scooping protection, and follow up with our activities in data integrity and open science approaches. So this is our sort of graph on how publication process ideally should work like. So we would like to support easy submission process, so you do not need to go through complicated reformatting steps to come to one of our journals. We care about science that is in the paper rather than how you present it. Of course, it should be readable and the pictures should be clear, but that's all that we worry about. In the first 3 to 4 days, the editors will get back to you and tell you whether the paper will go out for review or whether it could be better matched to a different journal. And in up to 1 month, you will get back the referee comments in case we have sent the paper out for review. One major policy that our journals have is the focus on one main revision round, which should be 3 to 6 months. The goal for this is to avoid very long, multi-year revision process in which the authors are kept in limbo without really knowing if their paper has a good chance to be ultimately published. And as you can see, this sort of commitment works very well. So up to 95% of manuscripts that we invite for revision actually go through this one revision round and get published in our journals. So if a revision is invited, then there's a very good chance for the manuscript to actually come out in the end. Our review process is fully transparent. So this was started by EMBO Journal in 2009. What does it mean is that all communications between authors and editors and referees can be seen online after the acceptance of the manuscript. So you can go and read this for every paper we publish. There's various steps of consultations, both between referees and editors and authors, to make sure that once we commit to the revision, it's clear what the authors have to do to ultimately get accepted. We do this both before inviting a revision and afterwards. So referees talk to each other before we contact the authors to invite the revision, to crystallize the most important points for the revision that have to be addressed. We might go to the authors at this point as well to see if there are some tricky questions, whether they're actually able to tackle these problems and whether the manuscript has a chance to sort of come to the level we need to accept at our journals. And in any case, after we invite the revision, we consult with the authors to make sure how experimentally they will go about the revision, and to make sure that after 3 to 6 months they have a smooth sailing and can get in. So this is what the review process file looks like. You can see the full timeline of the process. You can see who was responsible for the paper, and you can see the full exchange that went on during the assessment and revision process. Interestingly, these files are occasionally read, so there is some interest. So you can also go up and take a look. Also, if you want to see how to review papers, this can be an interesting educational material for the students. You can see what type of referee reports, how they look like, what did people comment on, and how the authors addressed it. So it can be helpful when preparing for your own submission. What we also offer is scooping protection. So this applies to manuscripts submitted to any of our journals. This is important if you are applying for a journal with a high novelty threshold. And what it means is that once the paper has arrived at our office, if your competitor has made similar finding and this is published now, we will not count it against the novelty of your manuscript. This is now extended to the preprints. So preprint gives you sort of a timeline badge that you were the first to make this discovery. And if after posting of the preprint 4 months, you have time to come to our journals, and again, this scooping protection applies. We also have established a rather active manuscript transfer process between EMBO Press journals, but this is being extended also in broader scale with other journals, in particular Nature Springer family journals. What does it mean is that if a manuscript is reviewed at one journal, you can take these reviews and go to another journal and then get it published there. So the goal here is to reduce the number of refereeing rounds that the manuscript goes through until it finds its final home, so to speak. This helps against referee burnout as well. So we often have situations where people say, well, I have seen this paper before, I can send you my comments, but I'm not sure how happy the authors will be to see this again. We sort of cut down these problems by making sure that one set of reports is enough to get into the next journal, which provides a clear commitment what section of these comments needs to be addressed. So of course the cutoff is different between EMBO Journal or EMBO Reports or Life Science Alliance. So it's possible that even if the paper was rejected from one journal with a smaller scope of revision, you have a good chance to get into a different one. Another development here is refereed preprints. So you can take referee reports from the EMBO Press journals and link them to your preprint. From our side, you can also take them to any other journal outside of EMBO Press as well. This is something that we hope will be of advantage also for scientific assessment. So different funders, including EMBO, now allows refereed preprints as a proof of productivity, of scientific productivity when assessing eligibility for different grants and funding processes. As part of this refereed preprint development, an important player has been Review Commons. This is a platform that was established by EMBO Press in collaboration with other publishers. It is a journal agnostic or independent review platform. So you can submit your manuscript without targeting it to a particular journal. It will be reviewed by referees that will assess it purely on its scientific contribution and soundness of research. And then with these reports, you can either link them to the preprint as a refereed preprint or go to a journal to get it published in a more traditional way. And these are the collaborating journals. So you can see that there's quite a bit of selection. And you can sort of test waters in various journals and get a quick response from them, whether with these reports and this type of work they are interested. So this also helps to make process smoother until the manuscript finds its final target journal. All right, so from this part, I would like to do a quick insight in our data integrity screening part. So as we support the open and sound science, excellence in science is what EMBO stands for. We also do our best to make sure that manuscripts that are published in our journals sort of are contributing to these goals. And for that, for all the manuscripts that we consider to be accepted, so after the revision is completed, they undergo data integrity screening. This includes also plagiarism check, but also image check and data check. So there are different levels of issues that we find. So it's interesting that up to 1/5 of papers which are otherwise evaluated by good scientists in 2 rounds, there are still problems that we need to fix before they can appear online. We see it as our service to the authors as well to make sure that these problems will not have more challenges to be corrected afterwards. Most of them come under genuine mistake category, which are copy-paste errors, assembly errors, flipped images, or mislabeling. Another category that we often deal with is beautification, which is where the authors want to make the life of readers easier. They increase contrast, cut out parts of lanes of their gels or of microscopic images, which still is not what we support at this time in the publication process, because it leads to loss of information and potential misrepresentation of findings. And then there are more severe cases, which is selective reporting, and that is more tricky to notice and to catch at this stage, but can happen if once we have source data submitted for the figures, which I will talk about in a bit. And of course, the more critical situations where there is a clear intent to mislead the reader with fabrication of the findings. So here's a bit of breakdown, how many cases in which categories we find, and at least for us relieving is the fact that most of them are this sort of category 1, where there has been no evil intent, but simple error, or the scientists have tried to make the images and data a bit more aesthetically pleasing. So this we can correct before accepting the manuscript for publication. Levels 2 and 3 are more severe, so there could be some sort of change of conclusion based on what has been done with the data or how it has been altered. In these cases, we might contact institutions because they are the ones which have access to the original data and experimental notes, and they can tell us whether the findings are sound, whether there has been an error or a more general problem. And in some cases, then the manuscript is rejected if we lose trust that the findings are correct and reliable. EMBL Press has been, however, working also in making process of correcting published record a bit more scientist-friendly. So whenever we see term retraction, it sort of automatically implies purposeful fraud or some sort of really evil intention. However, there are cases where the authors themselves, after some time, realized that their reagents were contaminated, that there were some errors in data analysis they did not notice at that point, and they might wish to correct the publication on their own. And this is something which we strongly encourage. So there are different processes for this. For example, we can use retract and replace in case if the authors can provide sound data set from the same experimental run, or partial retraction if we can excise part of the findings while keeping the main message of the manuscript. We also would like to encourage the term withdrawal in contrast to the retraction to sort of indicate the situations where the authors have been the ones coming forward and to support them in this process. As I already mentioned, in all of this, data availability is quite important. So to assess data integrity, we also require source data. So this is all data sets and original images behind the manuscript and the beautiful figures that are usually submitted as the final publication. We now mandate data deposition for original and large data sets and also for screening data for manuscripts that are under revision for our EMBL Press journals. And also latest at the point of publication, they have to be publicly accessible for all the readers. We also encourage citation of data sets, such as, for example, proteomic, metabolomic, or general structural data sets that have been deposited, even perhaps not linked to a final publication at this point. So this is all to encourage reuse of data and to provide appropriate credit to the people who have contributed to these data sets. Bettina already briefly mentioned the source data platform, so this is part of these efforts. This is a curation platform that aims to sort of unlock the data enclosed in a manuscript and to make it more available for people looking for particular reagents that have been used in an experiment, particular type of experiment, things that are more challenging to find by PubMed search or perhaps Google search. So you can go into this platform and look for particular setup or type of experiment, and hopefully it will guide you to the results more easily. It also helps to link together various databases, data sets, papers, and source data together in one platform. So the general goal of all of these attempts and innovations is to make science and the data obtained by scientists more accessible and reusable. So different approaches to facilitate this, starting from the transparent editorial process to the review commons platform, which allows the reuse and transportability of the referee reports, to these more data-based approaches such as source data, and also S- platform that I will just briefly mention, which is set up to provide exchange with data packages and data sets that have not been published yet, but that you might want to share with your colleagues already before the final publication. And in the end, there are also courses that we prepare and offer as scientific editors that anybody can apply to, and EMBO fellowship carriers can do it for free. So EMBO postdocs, for example, can participate in these courses without a charge. So these are scientific integrity courses in which we go into more detail about these topics. Also paper writing, paper reviewing, and figure designing courses that could be of interest to PhDs and postdocs, and sometimes even to more established scientists. And with this quick run through, I would like to encourage you to ask questions or to join the group session afterwards to talk about general publishing, EMBO Press publishing, or even your own manuscript if you would like to get any input about this. And I welcome any questions. Thank you for your attention.
Very nice talk. Thank you very much. What are impact factors of your journey? In particular, about all, if you can say, in particular, I'm interested in molecular systems biology.
So the latest impact factor is around 10. I have to say that we try to move away from impact factor centric focus. So this is part of DORA assessment as well. But we are very aware that this is something that very much determines the choice of scientists where to go with your manuscript. EMBO Journal is currently impact factor 11. But I would struggle to give you a very clear rundown of all 5 journals, but we can discuss it later and I can look it up for you.
Okay, clearly EMBO journals are some of the few which have this impact factor 10 or more, yeah? So this is remarkable. So more questions? Okay, okay, very good. So, micro.
I was about the preprint review. It's the reviewers are also volunteers, I suspect, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Because it's not paid in any way, and
so they can, well, this is part of this movement that Bettina was mentioning, to find ways how to support referee input. So one thing that they can do is to link their referee report to a platform called Publons. So there you can sort of collect information about how the person has contributed to refereeing. And more and more funding agencies keep this effort into account when considering contribution to the scientific community. Because this is, of course, a complicated question. These are people volunteering with their expertise to help their colleagues improve their work. PUBLONS.
Yeah, a general question. The presentations you will make available for us, yeah, for the ministry. Yeah,
yes.
okay, okay. Of course, if there's some unpublished data or something like that, you can take out, yeah.
This is all
but I mean,
open.
Yeah.
In the open science spirit,
Oh,
it's
no,
all
okay.
openly accessible, and it's completely fine to do it.
Okay, and actually this is my question, which is also regarding the open data, because with this open data, actually we encounter a lot of problems. And the problem number one is that if someone, let's say, regarding the primary data, the ethical committees can, of course, always limit the primary data to what is really needed. And that means this depositing of full data set can be simply not very possible. Yeah. So you can, in fact, deposit the data set, which you use it, for instance, for statistical calculations, which can be, of course, very much mutilated data set. Yeah. But much bigger point, and there I see an absolute conflict between this scientific publishing industry and, for instance, with industry of healthcare, is regarding the secondary data, where normally you get access not to data, you get access to secure processing environment where you can calculate your sigmas, lambdas, betas, but you get absolutely no access to data. You can simply run your aggregate calculations, yeah, against data, which you will never get access. And simply you get back this alpha, beta, gamma, epsilon, and so on. And this is all what you have. You have one number, nothing else. And it's absolutely impossible to retrieve the original data. What is the policy regarding the secondary data? Because the European Commission is running sick with the regulation for secondary data and massive use of secondary data. And actually we see that, for instance, in China, which has much less scruple, the secondary data is really delivering a lot of progress, yeah, especially in artificial intelligence, where you have these zillions of records to feed this artificial intelligence in order it becomes really intelligent. What is the policy of your journal system regarding these obvious problems with open data? Because it sounds very good, open data, but the reality is completely different. Thank you.
Okay, so this was a very complex and multi-layered question. So it sounds like one issue is medically obtained data. So our journals usually do not encounter this type of data sets. In case if they have to be patient blinded, this is of course done, but the type of information we get is usually not protected by the firewalls you mentioned. So we have not had to encounter these challenges very frequently. We do encourage reuse of data sets, as I mentioned, just to, you know, in some cases there's no point to rerun the same experiment, especially when we look at patient-obtained information. This is something that I think other researchers can benefit from. Question about artificial intelligence is the one that one can give another presentation on. So we do not support involvement of artificial intelligence in data handling. However, in terms of writing the manuscript, this is something that people already use and they just have to disclose it. So this is something where the authors carry responsibility for the final manuscript that they submit to us. And they need to clearly tell us where and how they have used it. Especially for scientists from countries where English is not their native language, we see that they benefit from using it, but they need to be able still to read the full story and to make sure that there are no creations in the text by the artificial intelligence which change the meaning of what they are trying to tell the readers. So this is of course a challenge, because if they need to use ChatGPT to write a paper, they might not also be able to appropriately edit it afterwards, and this is something which we'll have to encounter most probably more and more in the coming years. but we are getting ready for it.
So I understood your answer. In fact, that your journal is, of course, preferring first clearly defined scientific groups where you have this pyramid of data, yeah, and everything is accessible. And the second kind, of course, you prefer articles which are based on primary data. Yeah, this is my conclusion. Thank you.
Right.
Okay. So, yeah.
Thank you for the valuable presentation. I would like to ask, so does EMBO journal has an assistant group who's actually helping you to decide which journal would be best fitted for my manuscript or for my report? And the second question would be, does EMBO journal provide any availability to collect and like treasure your data sets, making sure that they are not in cause of fraud used, you know? Are there any kind of options that I can be sure that my novelty and my data will not be used for any other situations? Thank you.
So in terms of advisor group, this would be the editors. So when you submit your manuscript, the editor who reads your submission will also discuss with the editorial teams at other journals. Of course, in the case if the first target journal finds that the paper will not be the best match for them, we will go to our colleagues in the other teams and talk to them and see if we can find a good place for the paper. In terms of the question about data fraud, and this is, I'm trying to understand what would be the correct answer for this. So there are depositories that we suggest for the authors to use for different types of data sets. So for proteomics, there's one type of database. For imaging studies, there's a different type of database that is better suited for submission there. And this we have listed on our website. So these are the partner depositories that we recommend for the authors to use. When people access this data, we do, of course, cannot tell what they will do with it. But I do struggle a bit to see the implications of even potential reuse for the authors. So I do hear sometimes concerns from people who say, we want to keep on working on this data set, but we are worried that our competitors will now take our data and will go ahead with their findings faster. So this is, of course, a major challenge of open science, and we fully understand it. However, we are going with the times, so to speak. This is now the mandate from most of funding agencies and also from most of high-level publications. And this is where we hope that the authors who have produced these data sets, they already have a boost in time and effort to quickly use these data and to make sure that they are already working on this and they can get their results out fast. Additionally, every major screen and analysis gives such a wealth of data that can be reused, reanalyzed in multiple ways that perhaps the authors themselves would not think of and would not be able to apply. And in this sense, we hope that the referral back to this data set being used in the work of others as a citation is also something that contributes then to the success of these authors as well.
A very good question. But actually, this what you said, it is more like, let's say, your a kind of policy issue with this open data you are following, or it is, let's say, in general that you are looking, let's say, mostly public-funded research, and the data must be really available to society.
It's both. It's basically both. So part of it is, of course, the fact that you know, publicly funded information that has been acquired has to be available. And part of it is also our efforts to make sure that this data is reusable by other scientists. And also part of our attempt to make sure that our referees get a full access to the information that is needed to evaluate manuscripts and their soundness. So there are multiple layers to this, but all of it comes together in the fact that more and more the sort of core data and not just the final calculations and assessments are becoming shared and reused and sort of more available to the scientists and anybody who wants to work on it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So we can conclude it's nice to have in-house publisher. Okay. So any more questions or no? Okay. We will have now coffee. Thank you, Eva. Yeah.
So yes, I will give you a general overview of what EMBL is, what we do, and just for the clarification, I will show again the what Bettina showed already before, and you got the introduction to EMBO and EMBC already. And then in 1974, so we are celebrating 50th anniversary next year, EMBL was established, and EMBL stands for European Molecular Biology Laboratory, and we are a research infrastructure organization. So EMBL has 6 sites with its headquarters in Heidelberg, and the second biggest site is in Hingston, so close to Cambridge, which is EMBL EBI. It focuses on bioinformatics. We also have 2 structural biology sites, one in Hamburg and one in Grenoble. The Hamburg site is close to DESI, so the German synchrotron. And the Grenoble side is close to ESRF. We have a site in Rome, which is focusing on epigenetics and neurobiology. And the newest site was established only a few years ago. It's in Barcelona and focuses on tissue biology and disease modeling. We are supported by 28 member states, which you can see here. Estonia just joined this year as a full member. We also have 2 prospect members, so Latvia is still in the prospect member state, and Serbia just joined this year. So Latvia is in the final steps to becoming a full member. And the prospect member state period is for 3 years, where member states can still get access to everything that we use and for basically no fee. And then they decide after 3 years if they want to become full member or not. We also have 1 associate member state, which is Australia, and this is a non-European state. So what membership in EMBL actually brings is international impact, so the presence in major pan-European networks, and basically to the national life sciences in Europe and beyond. It also benefits for the scientific community, and there's a strategic role of members in EMBL. So EMBL member states have the delegation in the EMBL Council, which Latvia also has, of course, and this determines then also the strategy of EMBL, also the decision on the program of EMBL, and the missions for the benefits of participating countries. So since Latvia joined as a prospect member state, a lot has already happened, and there was already a lot of collaborations, and we are building links, and we started one which was already during the pandemic, but there was an online workshop that was organized already in June 21 to raise awareness of EMBL program and discuss potential collaborations. This had around 85 registered participants. We already worked on several widening proposals together with Latvian researchers. And in 2022, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the Latvian Biomedical Research and Study Center. And this aims to stimulate mutual beneficial scientific and academic exchange and collaboration in various interests that are of that are of interest to EMBC and EMBL. With this memorandum and also different links, we want to ensure that there is more connectivity and more collaborations between EMBL and Latvian researchers. We have noticed already since Latvia joined an increase in participation in EMBL training programs, and we are sure that maybe after this event and then also when Latvia becomes a full member, that this will, the Latvia will further connect and integrate. So we, for example, in EMBL courses and conferences, the numbers of participants from Latvia have almost doubled between the years of 2020 to 21. Or also the use of EMBL EBI training resources have increased, and there has also been a growing participation in mentorship programs for master students since 2020. So EMBL works around 5 main missions, which are one of the most important ones is the excellent research that we do. And performing fundamental research in molecular biology. The second one are scientific services, and I'll also give a short overview later. So we offer vital services to scientists in member states and also the world. We provide advanced training, so to train scientists, students, visitors at all levels. This includes courses and conferences, so external training, but also the PhD program, the postdoctoral program, the visitors program, and so on. The fourth mission is innovation and translation. So we actively engage in technology transfer and also in industry relations. And 5 is integrated life sciences. So we coordinate and integrate European life science research, which is done through EMBL partnership program, but also through different widening opportunities and different research infrastructure that we work together with. So I mentioned before that EMBL works on its 5-year program. So we are currently kind of in the middle of our program, which is Molecules to Ecosystems. I won't go much into detail here. Amy will also present one of the transversal teams that EMBL is now working on. So we are now structured across EMBL through this transversal team, because we want to establish and proper new research teams with the EMBL program, but also to connect different sites that EMBL has with each other, and also to connect with researchers in our member states. So within this program, EMBL will build on its core strengths in molecular biology to gain mechanistic understanding of life in context. And we are still, we didn't change the direction of EMBL so much. We're still doing basic research in molecular biology, but we want to encourage and bring and introduce these new transversal teams like human ecosystems, planetary biology, infection biology, microbial ecosystem, and also data sciences and theory, and link them as well to each other. There are different calls open for applicants from Latvia. I already mentioned the PhD program. This is a 3.5 years program that is structured with secured funding. The next deadline for this is coming up, and of course Latvian students are already encouraged to apply. We also have one of the newest programs, which is ARISE. This is a career accelerator for research infrastructure scientists, with also basically a deadline in a few weeks or a week. This is a fellowship program that trains technology developers to become research infrastructure scientists with leadership prospects across sectors, and the fellows that apply to this come with a background from STEM. We also have a new program, which is the sabbatical visitor fellowships. So these are, I think deadline is coming up soon, and it's open, I think, every 3 months comes, and it's for one of the transversal teams. And this, through this program and fellowships, scientists can come and visit EMBO group for 3 to maximum 6 months to do their research there. And it can be any of the 6 sites of EMBO. We also have a postdoctoral fellowship program, I put link. This is supporting promising researchers from around the world, so especially from our member states, who are passionate about interdisciplinary research. So this is linking the projects link between collaboration between EMBO lab or EMBO and a lab that it's in the member states from the researcher. So it's kind of a shared position. And project must allow fellows to gain new interdisciplinary skills. Next call, it's also supposed to be open, I think, in October or November. The deadline was still, there's still no deadline. And if you want to learn more, all these opportunities are also available on our website, and all the relevant information as well. I mentioned this before, but we have few scientific services. One is the data resources and bioinformatics services. We also opened a few years ago the EMBL Imaging Center, and Simona will present more there. We offer structural biology services at our sites in Hamburg and Grenoble, and we have several core facilities, most of them in Heidelberg, but there are also some in Rome and in Barcelona, and these are core facilities support and advanced research and technology development. And these are also available to you to use. For the scientific visitors in facilities, we also offer some fellowships. So, for example, the Christian Boulon Fellowship. This is to support the travel and accommodation costs at EMBL. It's available to our member states. But there's also the corporate partnership program, which is available through the scientific visitors program, is to come and for the courses or the conferences at EMBL. And there's also several funding that is available to access EMBL Imaging Center, and I'm sure you also mentioned this more. So I will wrap up here, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
You mentioned that EMBL is involved in student training. Is there any chance that ambitious bachelor students could be involved in that training?
Yes, for sure. I think the best way for a bachelor student or master student as well is to contact the group directly that you're interested to involve. So all the research groups are listed on our website, so you can have a look. There are different units and I think then if you need some contacts, everything's available there, and you just write to the relevant group leader and ask if there's opportunity to come. But we, of course, support this. And
thank you very much.
You can also check through the visitors program if there's some funding for that as well.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. Well, as many of us know, there is such a very coveted person as bioinformatician. And I was just wondering, like, if I could outsource the EMBL some bioinformatician for, yeah, analysis for the big data or something like that?
I think everybody's open for collaboration. So if there's anybody or there are some skills or techniques that somebody at EMBL is doing and you are interested in it, again, it's best to contact them directly. I'm usually happy to and open to collaborate. And I think also you as a team leader should
actually aims to support the scientists from the external community in places like we mentioned, so analysis of data. We produce terabytes of data every day, but then we don't manage to support all our users in that. So, for example, part of the data science is also bioimage analysis, so analysis of images. That thing is actually within the beginning of the imaging center, but there are many other activities that support genomics and bioinformatics in general. But this is just, being built at the moment.
And if there's somebody at the EBI that is, because of the bioinformatics there, again, it's just to contact them directly, and if they have the availability and interest to collaborate, but for sure.
Okay, any more questions? Thank you. Thank you. And now I will be happy to invite, we are going to our, let's say, scientific program, and Amy Foreman will give a presentation also named EMBL's transversal theme. I hope from the previous presentation it's approximately clear what is meant by transversal theme, because EMBL is working really in various ways, and one of the ways is really let's say, emerging big topics, which are then dedicated special measures, So now we will listen on human ecosystems. So everything works,
Yeah, everything works. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me today. My name is Amy Foreman. I'm the Human Ecosystems Program Manager at EMBL. So, as Agatha already mentioned, EMBL has launched a new indicative scheme running from 2022 to 2026 called the Molecules to Ecosystems Programme. So the programme is broken into 6 key themes, which are of significant societal and scientific interest. And these are called transversal themes because they go across all of EMBL's sites, so all of the services and research. And the aim is to connect our expertise to address these challenges. So the programme that I'm working on is Human Ecosystems, and it's co-chaired by Cornelius Gross in Rome, Helen Parkinson at the EBI, and Oliver Stegel in Heidelberg. So all of these themes are chaired by group leaders at EMBL. So what do we mean by human ecosystems? Well, it's well known that certain genetic variants lead to propensity for disease, but the environment also has an impact. And by the environment and environmental exposures, we mean the social, physical, and biological exposures that you experience throughout your life. Physical, obviously, means pollutants and medication, just to point out. Individuals respond very differently to the exposures they experience. And this really identifies as a need to understand molecular mechanisms underlying these genotype and environmental interactions and how this leads to particular disease phenotypes. So a lot can be learned from environmental health, and one of the major things that happened in this area was the publication of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of. And this highlighted that there was a real impact of the insecticide DDT on the environment, mainly in America at the time. But the publication of this book initiated a huge drive for legislation of chemicals, and it's something that's still very important today. And there's increasing concern regarding the impacts of persistent organic chemicals and pollutants and other endocrine disrupting chemicals, which have been well known to have impacts on the environment for a number of years. And it's only now that it's really beginning to be addressed from a human health perspective. So, for example, there are 240 million registered chemicals at the moment, with 10 to 20 million added each year. And it's not possible to identify the toxicity of every chemical individually. So kind of chemicals are grouped based on their structure, and then they're tested to say this structure has this biological impact. But really, a lot of these chemicals are metabolized, and we don't know what the metabolites do. So this is a huge area of concern. From another perspective, and from the human health perspective, one of the first cohorts that was produced was this Dutch famine cohort. And this is a longitudinal data set of 2,414 registered births between 1943 and 1947 at a hospital in Holland. And these individuals have been followed up subsequently to see what the effects of undernutrition was during their gestation period when their parents were going through the Dutch famine. And it's shown that there has been a huge impact throughout these individuals' lives. And it shows that there's been an increase in type 2 diabetes, there's obesity in these individuals, and their offspring actually have higher birth weights compared to those that haven't experienced famine during gestation. But it's not really sure why. We don't know why. So there's obviously a huge amount of emerging evidence on non-communicable diseases as well. And the World Health Organization, in their latest report, stated that 74% of premature deaths resulted from non-communicable diseases, and the top 4 being cardiovascular disease, cancer, chronic respiratory disease, and diabetes. As an example of the environmental impacts of this, air pollution is one of the key things that have been studied, particularly across Europe and in the context of urban health. And it's been shown that 7 million premature deaths a year are due to air pollution globally, which is a huge amount. In the UK, very recently, within the last 2 years, it's been the first time that a death has been registered to be specifically caused by air pollution. And this was a child in London who died from chronic asthma. And in terms of the middle-income countries, there's also a need for understanding indoor air pollution and the use of gas ovens for cooking, which have been causing a huge amount of problems and leading to a number of diseases. And just to add that exposures all interact, this is just air pollution that I mentioned, but there are obviously multiple other exposures that you're experiencing at the single time. And there's increasing evidence to show that the gut microbiota and the way that the gut metabolizes various exposures also has an impact in how you respond to these conditions. So what can we do? Well, there's been huge progress in genomics, and we have a number of human cohort data sets now, particularly that we've had genomic data, such as the UK Biobank and FinGen, for example. And through these data sets, scientists have been able to establish genome-wide associations between disease and genetic effects. And Mendelian randomization is now being used to try and understand disease associations. But one of the most exciting things in a genomic context is the development of polygenic risk scores, where you will get your DNA sequence that will give you a percentage likelihood of getting a particular disease based on your genomic readout. But the percentage obviously doesn't include environmental impacts, so it may say you have a 80% chance of getting cancer, but the extra 20% is all due to what you've been exposed to throughout your life. So in terms of the exposure context, there's a real need to build into the epidemiology and genomics and link them together. So in the epidemiology field, the study of these exposure interactions is, well, the exposure is called the exposome, and there's a huge exposome community currently in Europe called the European Human Exposome Network. And they've been developing a number of methods to really try and capture exposure information, because as you can imagine, it's very difficult to say this person's been exposed to this much air pollution. You really need to quantify it. And they've been developing various techniques, all the way from satellite data down to very specific mass spectrometry techniques to really quantify the amounts of chemicals that you are exposed to as an individual. And they've also been developing various methods, such as population-level risk prediction models. In line with this, from a molecular understanding, there is a need to connect into the exposure science space and the toxicology community, who have traditionally looked at single exposure molecular effects, such as the ones I talked about previously in terms of chemical risk assessment and how you actually say whether a chemical is harmful or not. So there's a need to try and build this into mixture effects and understanding the various other exposures, not just chemical, but also social and physical as well. And also drive onto this impact on risk assessment. The toxicology community are very linked up with policy, but obviously all of this needs to have an impact on a wider scale as well. So how would this interaction look? How are we going to do this? So firstly, there's a need, well, there's an opportunity that we can go from these human cohort data sets that are increasingly being produced and understand exposure and phenotype associations from this, and then use this information to derive follow-up experiments in vitro and in vivo using model organisms and new approach methodologies. So through these genotype and exposure interaction experiments that we can do, we can really define the interactions in these species. But then there is a need to compile all this information together, and this is where in silico modeling and computational techniques will come into play. So by using model organisms, we'll then need to read across evolutionary to see how conserved these pathways are. And compile all this information together, because obviously multiple exposures need to be analysed computationally because it's so complex, and start developing better risk prevention models that can be used at the individual scale, such as in precision medicine, all the way up into the population scale for population health. Yeah, and as I mentioned, this has impacts for population health, precision medicine, but also One Health, obviously, very importantly, that the need to protect the environment and also human health collectively. So EMBL, the Human Ecosystems Transversal Theme, is currently made up of 28 members. So these are all group leaders and team leaders at the EBI. The membership is growing all the time as the program develops and moves in various different directions. The more we're engaging with the external community, the more we're finding that there are different areas that we need to move into. So what expertise is this bringing in? Well, we have a huge amount of genomics expertise, particularly at the EBI, looking at genome-wide association studies and identifying the impact of copy number variants, and this is particularly being done in Ewan Burney's group. We have expertise in genome instability and cancer, which Isidro Cortes-Siriano is looking at this, and various ways of identifying early detection methods for cancer. And then we have a number of groups working on exposures and model systems research. So going from genotype to phenotype effects, this is predominantly being done by Mike Doherty, who's looking at the effects of temperature on zebrafish. Pesticide exposures, we actually have a pesticide library at EMBL, which has characterized a huge number of pesticides in the environment. Epigenetics, there's a huge number of groups working on epigenetics. Organoid models, which is being primarily driven in EMBL Barcelona. And fundamental neuroscience, which is a real flagship at EMBL Rome. We can then build across into the computational experimental remit through genomic network analysis and gene regulatory networks, which is being done at the EBI, using AI and novel machine learning methods, and also through various other actual technical methods, such as spatial omics by combining single cell and imaging techniques. And not to exclude EBI services, which are hugely important. We have a number of services already existing that relate to human cohort data. And there's an opportunity to expand these to better characterize exposure impacts. So you could be able to search an exposure within the EBI repository, and then it will pull up all of the data sets relating to that exposure. So the current activities in human ecosystems are broken down into a number of key areas. In terms of research, so far we've funded 2 projects relating to G times E. Methods, we're running a collaborative workshop next year on profiling environmental exposures in human cohort datasets. We're also developing services through an ARISE fellowship. And very importantly, we're engaging a lot with externals to develop training opportunities and also work out where the needs are within the community globally. And we've recently joined Horizon Europe called Cost Action on the Global Human Exposure Network, and that's beginning in January next year. Which will really give EMBL a footing into this exposing community, so we can really start to provide more of that mechanistic understanding that's needed. So one of the first projects we funded is looking at intergenerational effects, and this is headed by Anna Boskovic and Jamie Hackett in Rome. And they're asking the question, is epigenetic inheritance a common response to stress in mammals? We know that epigenetic inheritance occurs, but it's not known whether different stresses act via the same pathway to induce germline effects or different pathways. So there's also another question, an extra layer to this, is how is this response, if it occurs, influenced by age and also influenced by underlying genetics? So Jamie and Anna have devised this high throughput experiment where they're exposing male mice to a series of stressors. So these mice, they're having different genetic backgrounds as well. So they're different genetic backgrounds and different ages. So they're going to have a huge amount of data here. Some of the key stressors, the social stress through injecting cortisol, medication from metformin, diet, so it's looking at low protein diet effects, pollutants, specifically microplastics, and looking at the effects on the microbiome through antimicrobial clearance. So that there's absolutely no microbiome within the gut of these male mice. So through doing these individual exposures, they're then going to look at the effects on the physiology of those mice and the various molecular endpoints across the paternal line, looking at the impacts on embryogenesis, both within the live-born embryos and also through embryos produced through IVF to really understand those germline mutations. So they've actually got some preliminary results back from this, which is looking very exciting. They found no significant difference in testes weight or gene expression so far, but they have found an effect of weight in the gut of the cecum, and this is under dietary exposures. But significantly, they have seen an effect of the exposures on the blastocysts produced through IVF. So as you can see, there's been a huge change in gene expression in the microbial clearance male mice and in those that have had a low protein diet. And interestingly, these gene expression patterns do not overlap. So there's different mechanisms here happening. Something is going on. This is very new data, and they're analysing it further at the moment and looking at the next stage in the other exposures to try and really mine and understand what's happening. So the second project that we funded is looking at the environmental exposures and how this leads to cancer. This is a new project, so it's not actually started yet. But it's run by Talia Dayton at EMBL Barcelona and Isidro Cortesiriani at EMBL EBI. And they're asking if cancer-associated mutations lead to a change in susceptibility to tumorigenesis. And Talia has generated these really interesting neuroendocrine organoid models. The neuroendocrine cells are found in the proximal lung, but interestingly, these endocrine organoids that she's generated contain all of the key cells that can be found in the lung. So the idea here is to generate a number of these neuroendocrine organoid models, both healthy and those derived from patients, and do a number of exposures to pollutants that we are known to be associated with cancer. So interestingly, and very recently, it's been shown that genomic mutations that have been linked to causing tumorigenesis, they could be a precursor, meaning that they need an environmental trigger to initiate tumorigenesis rather than being induced by an environmental pollutant. So there's a real need to try and understand this further. And if you're interested in this project, Talia has a postdoctoral fellowship position currently open, which is closing on the 3rd of October. And I'll be very interested to talk to anyone here that wants to hear more about that. So one of the other things I've been working on is on methods development. And this is building on work run by Oliver Stagel, who's got expertise in AI. And he's been developing a technique of using single-cell sequencing data to identify novel genetic variants underlying the immune response. And this has huge ramifications, particularly for data that's being held in the biobanks at the moment, because they're starting to employ more single-cell sequencing methods in blood cohort data. So we should soon have population-level data sets on single-cell data in blood. So the questions are, what can we actually take from this? What can we learn about what someone was exposed to just from taking a single blood sample? So this workshop will bring in various members of the community, the molecular community, epidemiologists, and sociologists, to try and identify what non-targeted methods we could start using and what targeted methods we could start using to try and get a full understanding of the exposures that one person could experience and how that links to their propensity to get specific diseases. As I mentioned, another remit is services and the importance of services. And we have an Arise Fellowship that we're funding over the next 3 years. This position is currently open, and there's a possibility for the fellow to work on 4 projects. So just so you know, Arise Fellowships are very similar to postdoctoral positions, but you'll be working more on developing infrastructure and infrastructure services, which are vitally important for research. So there are 2 projects that are currently running at EBI. The first is the biostudies portal, which is being used a lot in the toxicology community, but there's a need to extend this more to the epidemiology and exposures community. There's AI tool development at EMBL EBI, spatial genomics for investigating exposure effects, and also extending the PROPVAR database, which is looking at human protein missense variation, and this need to include the impact of environmental exposures here. So yeah, so that's currently open, closing on the 30th of September. We've been engaging a lot with externals, and we have a publication that's currently in progress towards a molecular understanding of the exposome. I'm very happy to talk to anyone about this, but it basically builds on what I've been discussing earlier. There's a need to connect the toxicology and environmental communities, and this is something we've been doing in the programme. We've been building on networks with the European Human Exposome Network, as well as ASPIS cluster, particularly precision tox, and this cluster is working towards reducing animal testing and getting to better human relevant toxicology testing methods. So there's good opportunities here. One of the final things we've been doing is that we're running a training course next year exploring gene and environmental exposure interactions to understand human health and disease. This will go all the way from how you identify human cohorts to how you analyse that by finding genotype associations, how you mine these existing data sets to look for exposure effects, and then how you go into identifying molecular mechanisms and genotype and environmental effects. And finally, it will go into what are the actual impacts of this to human populations, looking at human health, risk assessment, and other mechanisms. So yeah, that's open and closing on the 5th of November. And just to summarise, there are multiple opportunities to get involved in human ecosystems transversal theme, and we're very excited to engage with the Latvian community, and I'm very happy to take any questions on this.
So, many thanks, and questions. One remark, the EMBL, we plan really to join already this year. This is in our plans, yeah? So this will be surely on the ministry's page when we will finalize, yeah, the not ratification, but approval system with the Swiss government. But I think this will happen very, very soon. So now questions for EMBL. Oh,
thank you very much. I always admire MBL horizon and deep thinking, so you just demonstrated it. But what about human ecology? You are speaking about more in frames of ontogenesis, population genomics. Then you mentioned evolutionary interference. What do you mean with that?
Conservation, evolutionary conservation.
Conservation of what?
Of genetic pathways between model organisms and humans. You're looking for toxicology.
Between?
Aspects. Model organisms, so like zebrafish or mice.
Yeah, because I think that you know, humans were on the edge of extinction many times in the evolution, and all this has its trains in phylogenetics of the genome. So I think it would be rather interesting to deep in that aspect.
Yeah.
In our laboratory, we have some experience. Then you mentioned network special omics. What does it mean? It is network genes network, yeah, or chromatin networks?
So gene regulatory networks.
Sorry?
Gene regulatory networks.
The spring, yeah, analysis, such things. Yeah. Not really chromatin networks. Okay. And then you mentioned that you have the collection of embryo after IVF.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you study aneuploidy there or something?
I will have to put you in touch with Anna to ask more of the details on what they're going through. Basically, they're getting a huge number of samples which they're keeping.
Because
so they can extend it later to look at further endpoints.
I'm very interested because in normal blastocysts, you can find aneuploidy and translocations that are later not found in baby.
Yeah.
So this question is very interesting. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, I can forward that on.
So more questions. Aha, you are in the project also, yeah.
Okay, yeah. No, maybe if you can summarize how can somebody interact with your as I understand correctly, that themes are still, I mean, the actual work is more or less internal to EMBL. How the external partners can collaborate, or how they can connect. But just mentioning, okay, of course, I think it's a good opportunity to have these courses, and this is one way to attract. But for example, the number of things that that I saw already in your example presentations is something that I'm maybe quite interested. For example, I saw the metformin, which we also have my study, which we did something similar, not exactly concentrating on epigenetics, but on other things. And of course, obvious thing is maybe we would be interested to see whether these gene expression pathways we see changes after the diet or metformin exposure are the same. So are these data viable, and can we contact you in this matters and things like that?
Actually, so this human ecosystem transversal theme is moving EMBL to a totally new area. So a lot of what we've been doing is connecting with external collaborators. We get a certain awarded funding every year. It's not a huge amount, but it's enough for seed funding. And this year's funding call is really prioritizing projects where EMBL group leaders have connected with external collaborators. So, for example, your expertise would be great for us because we don't have anyone particularly working on that. So if I get you in contact with Anna and Jamie, for example, then there is opportunities there to start making a collaboration and collaborative.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. So, more questions? Yes. Yeah.
Hello, thank you for the great talk. I wanted to ask if these exposome studies are also involving things beyond chemical pollution, such as physical, vibration, sound, and light pollution as well?
From a mechanistic level, I'm not entirely sure yet. So a lot of the kind of exposome level associations in terms of light and temperature and things like that are primarily done from an environmental pollution perspective rather than a human health perspective, which is why there's a need to connect with these individuals to be like, you've looked at this in a fish population and done this very much from an environmental health perspective, but actually we think this has impacts for human health. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, and it's actually very complicated to try and identify which exposure hasn't affected a human population, because as you can imagine, everyone's exposed to everything all the time. So these associations are quite hard to define in the first place. So it's a real area that needs a lot of work at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay, more questions? Then I would say many thanks. And now we have, I think, a final presentation in very important area also, it's imaging. And be very frank and ask also the questions like how we can, for instance, get more knowledge of some spatial new methods in molecular biology, because what is important, the EMBL is one of the few places in the world which is really elaborating new methods, yeah? So we don't have very many places which are doing this, yeah? So, okay. Simone Mattei, yeah, will give you a presentation.
Yep. Hello, everyone. I'm Simone Mattei, and at EMBL Heidelberg, I have a dual role. This is why I have a double affiliation. I'm team leader, and that means I have a research group affiliated to the structural and computational biology unit. I mainly work on infectious biology programs and projects and protein translation. And I also lead the service team at the Imaging Center, which I will tell you much more about. And after this morning presentations, I actually realized that I'm a product of both EMBL and EMBO, because I was an EMBL PhD student. So I was in the program a few years ago. Then I did my postdoctoral work at ETH in Switzerland while being supported by an EMBO postdoctoral fellowship. And now I'm back as team leader there. And today, my role is to introduce to you the Imaging Center and show the activities of my group and my colleagues in the transversal team infection biology. But let's start with a very general introduction. I think we can all agree that in the past 2 decades, imaging technologies are really revolutionizing how we can study life. There are some great examples of how disruptive technology has allowed us to study living organisms from their entirety up to the at the atomic level. So we have now X-ray imaging that allows us to image large volumes, intravital microscopy, mainly light sheet microscopy that was developed at EMBL, and super resolution light microscopy and cryo-electron microscopy, which were both awarded Nobel Prizes because of their tremendous impact on our ability to study molecular processes, both in situ and in vitro. So all those technologies allow us to image the life at the different scales, from the full organisms down to their organs and tissues, then to go at the cellular level, and then study at the atomic level macromolecular machineries to understand how they are structured and how they work. And this, of course, requires a lot of expertise and access to high-tech instrumentation. And EMBL research groups and core facilities are between the leaders on these fields. However, there was such a tremendous amount of requests in terms of access to the microscopes, access to the expertise, and therefore collaboration that couldn't be sustained by the research groups or the internal core facilities, which are mainly meant to support EMBL scientists in addition to scientists from the member states. And that pushed EMBL in 2016 or so to initiate a new exciting project, the EMBL Imaging Center. The Imaging Center is a brand new facility which the main mission to provide open access to the cutting-edge imaging technologies, both in light and electron microscopy. And it is aimed at servicing the external scientific community. So the Imaging Center is truly being built for you. And we not only have all the high-end equipment available for you, but we support the users with tailored project support. Our staff is just a group of amazing scientists, all at the postdoctoral level, that help you throughout your workflows. And other core missions are, of course, as anything we do at EMBL, training. Training of the users, because of course you come and use the technology, but especially important for us is the trainer program. So training facility managers from different countries that will go back and will have a major impact in training the local community once back at home. And finally, technology development. Technology development is always at the core of our activities, and we do that in collaboration with our academic and industry partners, because our aim is to then distribute whatever we develop in a timely manner. And again, the overarching theme of the Imaging Center is really to enable the external researchers to image their biological processes from molecule to full organisms. And we are now, we've been open almost since 2 years now, since autumn 2021, for calls for any external project. So what do we offer? I mean, today, in the interest of time, I will just be able to give you a bit of a glance of what we do. Of course, in the breakout rooms later on, I'm happy to answer any question you might have. But mainly, we offer 3 categories of services: light microscopy, electron microscopy, and maybe even more importantly, the correlative approaches, CLEM, correlative light and electron microscopy, where the 2 techniques are joined to study both function with light microscopy, specificity, and structure information thanks to EM. My colleague Timo Zimmermann leads the light microscopy team, and they have really a very broad portfolio of imaging technologies at your disposal to study your questions. But I think what is really astonishing is their capability of supporting super resolution microscopy. Nowadays, thanks to the MinFlux technology, we are able, with light microscopy, to reach spatial resolutions in the range of 1.5 to 2 nanometers. There are now published papers done with these technologies where you can observe within a living cell the steps of the kinesin motor walking along the microtubule. So this is really changing entirely what we can do with light microscopy. And CLEM, of course, combines light and electron microscopy, however, facing the challenges that this has to be done at cryogenic temperature for structural biology's approaches. Therefore, the light microscopy approaches we can use are somewhat limited by the energy we can apply to the specimen without melting it. So for cryo-electron microscopy, your specimen is vitrified. It has to be kept at liquid nitrogen temperature throughout the process. So at the moment, we can use wide field and confocal imaging, but we are actively developing super resolution approaches that would be compatible with cryogenic temperatures. So with CLEM, we are again able to use fluorescence microscopy to identify the region of interest within a cell. For example, you might be interested in a specific organelle, lipid droplets, and target that for structural biology. In terms of electron microscopy, we support the users with sample preparation, so the vitrification, the rapid freezing of your specimens, the screening of the samples we've prepared. If you are working with cellular specimen, the thinning by focused ion beam milling, which allows to make these very thin 200 nanometer lamellae of cellular environment, which can then be suitable for transmission electron microscopy. So high-end data collection, both for purified specimens, if you're a structural biologist that has managed to purify a specific macromolecular complex, or high-end data collection for tomography approaches directly within the cell. If you're then interested in having a much bigger picture of what is going on in your cell, well, then the technology has to move to volume imaging, so using scanning electron microscopy for the visualization of maybe a full cell. And as I said, all those workflows are based on cutting-edge instrumentations. We have the latest transmission microscopes, both for screening and high-end data collection of single particle or tomography approaches. We have dual beam machines, the Achelos and cross beams, that can both prepare your specimen, so by fib milling to prepare the cellular lamellae, but also do volume imaging if that's what you're interested in, and those microscopes that link the two technologies. So the Eriscan is a confocal with the Eriscan detector, which is able to operate at cryogenic temperatures, so do light microscopy on a vitrified specimen. But again, technology, access to technology is one thing, but maybe even more important is access to the expertise on how to prepare your experiments, how to prepare your specimens, and then how to best use the instruments for data collection, and finally, how to interpret that. So we really try to support the users from in any area of the workflow they might need, and if you need support throughout the workflows, we can do that. We have many examples after 2 years of operations, but I just want to bring to your attention one, because I personally think it was it was great to see what imaging services can do for the community. In this case, we were supporting the lab of Professor John Atkins in Ireland, University of Cork, and John had a brilliant PhD student, Kate, which was able to purify bacterial ribosomes in a very specific translation state. However, they had no expertise nor access to cryo-EM devices and technologies. So they came to us with just purified specimens, and our specialists prepared the sample, screened them to identify the best conditions for cryo-EM grid preparation, then acquired a large amount of data that resulted in the determination of the ribosome map at 1.5 angstrom resolution. And just to let you understand, I mean, we had no real experience with the ribosome before, but still through just application of best practices, we were able to provide the highest resolution map available to date to a user that actually have never done cryo-EM. So this is, I think, just showing the impact that access to facilities like the Imaging Center can have on your research. Just to give you an overview of what we've been doing, you see that we are still in the ramp-up phase. In 2022, we were able to support almost 150 projects with more than 450 days of microscopies provided to users that come mainly from Europe, mainly from our member states, but actually we support also people from all over the world, India and US. We also not only serve academic users, but many industry researchers are accessing our services for cryo-EM. It's mainly pharma companies. And we do a lot of training, and that includes also job shadowing to train other facility managers and transfer the knowledge. Of course, training of individuals has an impact, but to broaden our to be more effective, we also organize symposia and courses to disseminate knowledge. So how to access our services? Well, we are just one email further from you, so you can just drop us an email and ask for help in understanding how your project can be supported. And there are many opportunities through the research infrastructure, so the ERIC, like Instruct or Eurobiomedicines and other European Commission funded projects that can support sometimes even entirely your project. So they might support travel, accommodation, and even all the imaging sessions that you require. So just contact us, we are there for you. So this is service provision, but we want to provide the latest technologies to you, but at the same time we don't stop there. We always push the technology development. And technology development is intertwined with biological questions. So we develop new instruments, new workflows to answer biological questions that cannot be answered with what we have right now. And this goes also into service provision, not only because whatever we develop will be transferred as a service to the community, but also the projects that comes through service provision pushes us to aim at specific technology development that are needed by the community. And we really aim to minimize the gap that exists between a new development that might happen at EMBL or somewhere else and the scientific impact, because when a new technology is developed, this has to be acquired by a company that will make a commercial product that then will be on the market. You will need to acquire grant funding, installing, learning how to use it. And often, by the time you have the technology up and running in your institute, you are already behind because 10 years pass by and we are already on to something new. So the Imaging Center really aims at providing you access to the latest and greatest as soon as they are robust enough to support external users. And our technology development is really done in collaboration with our also industry partners. We have the founders partner like Zeiss and Thermo Fisher, and then we added other new partners like Aberior and Cryosol that really help us to develop at all levels, from sample preparation to imaging. And they actively work on site with us, which is part of this open innovation initiative where their research engineers and developers are on site with us at the Imaging Center to develop the new workflows. So we really support all sorts of microscopies, from looking at full organisms from the ocean to high-resolution structural determinations, as I showed you, with a very broad range of biological applications and disease models. So this is actually very exciting, but as I said, it often requires a combination of techniques to go from one scale to the other. And what can be done now in correlative microscopy, which is also one of the main missions for us, because this is really something new and hard to find as a service, is this. So this is the current state of the art of correlative light and electron microscopy at cryogenic temperature, where you are able to image your cell of interest, which is growing on the EM grid as the support. You do light microscopy at cryogenic temperature, then you use a FIB milling device, or Foggius ion beam milling, to thin down a central region of the cell to produce this lamella, because otherwise the cell is too thick for transmission electron microscopy. So after thinning that down, you're able to do cryo-electron tomography on that and get ultrastructure level. You can also go back to light microscopy to make sure that your region of interest is actually retained in the cell. This sounds good and easy, would be great, right, to combine function and structure information from the two methods. However, multimodal imaging workflows are very complicated. They require a large number of devices, many steps, and there are so many things that nowadays can go wrong that pose challenges to the actual application. So to address all those problems, like connecting instruments and technologies that have been in the past developed independently from each other, and now they need to meet again in the middle, EMBL is leading a new consortium called Imagine. This is a European Commission-funded project that involves, I think, 17 or 18 partners from all over Europe, including some industry partners, and the aim is to, again, even further increase our ability to study structure and function of biological specimens across the scales. So not only doing light and electron microscopy on those, but we want to combine X-ray imaging to this, and of course our developments in advanced AI image analysis. And all these workflows will, of course, need to be rapidly transferred to the service facilities that are part of the consortium, thanks to the involvement of the research infrastructures like Instruct and Eurobioimaging. So I could talk for days about correlative approaches, but I just want to give you one glimpse of what this can actually mean to go from a full organism down to a molecular machinery. And this is the work of our colleagues at the Max Planck Institute in Martins Reed, from the group of Jürgen Plisko, and my colleague Julia Hamid at EMBL Heidelberg. And what you see here is a vitrified specimen. It's a 3 millimeter of diameter planchette, which contains worms, C. elegans worms. Of course, you're not able to see the worms because this is just a slab of ice. And in scanning electron microscopy, you only see the surface of the specimen. So how do I find my worms? Where? With CLEM. You correlate SEM data with light microscopy. And by this overlap, now you're able to identify the worm. And if you have a specific region of the worm that you want to investigate with structural biology, you can make a nanobiopsy. And with this kind of very fancy tweezers, you can lift out this chunk of material that can be deposited on a receiving grid. This is still way too thick to be imaged by transmission electron microscopy. So you have to apply focused ion beam milling to really thin down to 200 nanometers. And again, there you see the step and what is the aim? Well, on that very thin lamella, you can do electron tomography and therefore get structural information about, for example, the ribosome and how translation changes in the cells of the C. elegans, maybe under different metabolic conditions or stress conditions. So really going from the full organism and investigating at the molecular level biological processes. So infection biology, right? So we are also here to discuss some of the new transversal themes, and now we transition to maybe problems that are more related to our health. And the question is are infectious diseases still a problem, or this is behind us? I think we all know that we have many outbreaks of new infectious diseases. SARS-CoV-2 is a clear example. Diseases that have been affecting us for many years are still there and kill thousands of people. The antimicrobial resistance will be clearly a problem of the future, which has been clearly recognized by World Health Organization. And even if we have solutions to the infectious disease, we still have to fight against some portion of the population that doesn't want to listen. So yes, infectious diseases need to be tackled, and to do so, we are studying the biology of our pathogens, and mainly we study host pathogen interactions, responses of the host to the pathogen, how to develop new drugs to fight those infections, and platforms, bioinformatic platforms to allow access to all this wealth of data that is produced. So in the infection biology transversal team, the aim is to develop new technologies. I mean, here you see an example from the Maria Bernabeu lab where microfluidic chips have been designed to study how the Plasmodium, so malaria parasite, can infect blood cells directly within a capillary. I mean, this is really crazy that you are able to reproduce the actual environment of the host and then study at the structural level parasites. I showed you how high-resolution cryo-electron tomography can show you structural information within cells, and in this case we were able to identify how antibiotics bind to the ribosome directly within living cells that were plunge frozen. And of course, all these new technologies and strategies have to be made available, as I explained, by creating data platforms that can be accessed and investigated by everyone in the community. So I think one great example that shows the power of life sciences and molecular biology in tackling infectious diseases is what happened during the SARS-CoV-2 infection. EMBL was very active at all scales to contribute to the knowledge about this new disease. So we have great examples of how CLAM and volume imaging has been used to understand the viral replication. The development of drug and vaccine was also, part of our efforts through the collaboration with BioNTech that used EMBL's small angle X-ray scattering beamlines. And then, of course, all the studies about the epidemiology and the creation of the COVID-19 data portal for global sharing of the data we've been creating. So the infection biology theme involves many groups at EMBL that are scattered all over our sites, which each of them has their unique capabilities of technology and instrumentation. You see that the 4 leading labs that coordinate those efforts are in the 4 different sites: Eva Kowaliński in Grenoble, Maria Bernabeu in Barcelona, Jan Kosicki in Hamburg, and Nassos Tipos in Heidelberg. And here is a summary of of some of the activities that the transversal team is doing. We have synergy grants and common retreats, and this is again an opportunity for you to contact us and collaborate on specific topic of interest. And we have a regular meeting both to understand in which direction EMBL should move to fight infectious diseases, and we continue our effort on SARS-CoV-2 work, and basically building also the new level and the next generation of infection biology research, and this is why we are scouting for new talents. So if time allows, I'm not sure, should we stop here, or otherwise I can give you I just thought I can show you what can we do, right, with imaging, right? So this is very specific. This is maybe not really related to the new activities of infectious biologists, but I just wanted to show you briefly what cryo-EM can do for infectious diseases. So here, this is HIV. I think we are all familiar with this virus, unfortunately. And at the structural level, we have the structural protein, polyprotein GAG, which assembles underneath the membrane of an infected cell. And this budding particle at some point will bud as an immature virus. This is not infectious. When the protease, the viral protease is activated, we have a dramatic structural rearrangement of the virus. The conical core is formed and it encases the genome. This virion now is infectious, can go to the next cell, contact the cellular receptor, and release the cone inside the new cell. So it's clear that this process is where infectivity happens, and therefore studying this transient state will allow us to understand how to tackle the HIV. Cryo-ET can come in handy because we really have the structural information about both the immature and mature virions. But what is cryo-ET? I mentioned it a few times, but I've never shown you what it really means. So we use transmission electron microscopy to get images of the virions that have been purified and frozen in a thin layer of ice. Then we need to tilt the sample within the microscope and acquire a series of images. Why? Because those viruses are all different from each other. So we cannot get any structural information from one image. We need multiple views. And if you have a unique object, the only thing you can do is to tilt that object within the microscope and acquire a tilt series. And this is what you see now. So this is a collection of, in this case, 41 images at different angles of the same virus. I think, I mean, the projector doesn't help, but I can tell you there is not much to learn from that. You really need to use a computational approach to reconstruct the tomogram. The tomogram is a volume that represents the Coulomb potential, let's simplify it, the electron density of your specimen. And now we are slicing through the volume, and you can appreciate the ultrastructure of the virus. Those are enveloped, so you see this spherical membrane that encloses the capsids. The capsids are in the mature form, so they have these cones that encase this black blob, which is the viral genome. Great, ultrastructure information is very useful, but what if we want to know at the structural level how those viruses are really formed? Well, we apply a technique called subtomogram averaging. So you identify the repeating unit along the feature of interest. In this case, we know that the capsid protein forms hexamers to form these cones. And by rendering the cones, we can then understand how the individual hexameric units are arranged to form those cones. So from just the ultrastructural overview of the viruses, we can then go to the secondary structure level and get a structure of the subunits, hexamers and pentamers, and how they assemble to form a full intact core of the infectious virus. And you see, based on the position of the pentamers that are depicted in blue, HIV can have all sorts of shapes of its capsid, usually conical, but not always. And then the next step is, okay, now I know the structure of the full native core that has not been produced in vitro, but just observed within the virus. But what happens to the cone when it is released into the cell? So there were many hypotheses on how the genome was protected along the travel from the membrane of the infected cell to the nuclear pore complex, where it has to enter to integrate into the host genome. But the problem was always one. The nuclear pore complex is too small for a HIV capsid to go through. But it was hard to understand how the genome, while being replicated, was protected and therefore not triggering the response of the host cell. So this is the work conducted by Martin Beck. At the time, he was a group leader at EMBL. Now it's a Max Planck director in Frankfurt, and my PhD supervisor, Hans-Georg Kreuzlich from Heidelberg University. So they decided, okay, fine with the hypothesis, just let's see it within the cell. And this is what you see within the cell. Pretty much nothing. I mean, this is very noisy, all gray. And I'm telling you that I see an HIV cone that has traveled along a microtubule, and now it's approaching a nuclear pore complex. I'm not crazy, but this is, why we need light microscopy to really tell us where to look. And now I'm showing you, after you've done CLEM, the result. I mean, you can really render the conical core in purple that traveled along the microtubule in red, and it's really approaching the nuclear pore complex on the nuclear envelope. So those are quite complicated workflows, as you can see here, where you first have to prepare your cells and image them with light microscopy, well, here it's hard to find, but there is really a very faint signal in this small white box that points to one individual core in the full cell. So you're really looking for the needle in the haystack. But that leads to you seeing for the first time that actually a conical core can indeed go through the nuclear pore. How? I told you that this was too small. Well, it was too small because the nuclear pore complex structure was first solved in vitro, purifying the pore complexes. But actually, the nuclear pore complex has been shown in living cells to change size dramatically from 40 to 60 nanometers, and this depending especially on the metabolic state. So in living cells, the HIV cone can indeed protect the genome while being replicated throughout the journey to the nuclear pore complex, then pass through the pore and release the genome for integration into the host. So I hope that this was a very brief overview, but this is an actual case where both structural biology, application with EM and light microscopy allowed us to understand the life cycle of quite an important virus. And well, thanks for your attention. I'm very happy to answer any question.
Okay. So many thanks. So we have here the synthesis of biology and art, of course, yeah, in imaging. And actually we had a lot here in Latvia, also HIV research, but I would say some 10 years ago it was very active, yeah. So I see you have a good continuation of that. And now the time for questions. So, okay. It's good if you speak in the micro, and everyone can hear you.
Hello, I wanted to ask, these exchange programs, can they be, are they applicable to this imaging center as well for me, for example, to go for 3 to 6 months, learning, for example, 3D segmentation, different aspects that interest my research?
Yes.
Yeah.
So at the imaging center, you can come as a standard user where you have a project and you want to be supported, and this can be one option. You can come as a bachelor or master student, basically as a visiting scientist in my research group, so you will be part of my research team and you learn from them. Or you can come as a job shadowing program. So, but this might be more targeted to people that in the end will be working in facilities as well. But you see, basically you can access the same kind of expertise and knowledge by different routes depending on your career stage and what makes most sense for you. So in your case, I would tell you, well, it's easier if you come as a visiting researcher in my research group, because I can support you better that way. But yes, someone else that works in a facility can come for 3 or 6 months to really be trained on how to segment that, and it's also a bit a different job between applying something for your research project or learning something to apply that to many other projects.
Yeah, but basically, if I want to visit a group, I can look for groups that work in a similar aspects as I do to tailor them to my needs, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
And there are fellowships that help you with that can support your travel and accommodation for your stay. So in theory, that shouldn't be a burden.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, it is also often asked if you cooperate in the way that the Erasmus Plus can be used somehow, but I don't think that you are working directly. Then it's University of Heidelberg, most probably. Yeah.
I'm sure University of Heidelberg does that. I have never heard about that at EMBL, but I could simply be ignorant about the topic. So I don't want to tell you anything wrong. I'm not aware of any Erasmus activity, but could be.
Okay, so more questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Fabulous things to see. You mentioned, I have 3 small questions.
Sure.
You mentioned non-linear microscopy. What it is?
Actually, here you catch me. I'm not a light microscopist myself, so I have to say I don't know how the answer to that.
I shall read.
But
okay.
I mean, it could be. But I don't want to say something stupid.
The second question is the group of Pavel Hozak in Prague. imaging unit, are they part of also EMBL network or not? Because I saw that they are.
Of
they
the
are
imaging.
working. Yeah, they are imaging in the Institute of the Molecular Genetics in Prague.
I'm not entirely sure. I don't think so, but I might be wrong. So we have interaction, for example, with CETEC, the Czech imaging center, but I'm not there.
Yeah.
As far as I know. Yeah.
And what I want to ask, are you collaborating with the people that are working on improving imaging software? Yeah. How with this? Yeah. Do you need programs? How you get them and so on?
Yes, actually at EMBL we're quite lucky. We have many groups that work in that area. One of the clear leading group is Anna Kreshuk that developed Elastic, and together we are really developing software to help us throughout the stages of the workflow. So one thing we want to do is to automate image acquisition, so the identification of the region of interest and then the targeting by the different microscopes on technology. This is one step. The other step is to work with the data, so to do the pre-processing and the creation of data sets already. Sometimes it's quite difficult for volume imaging to create these large volumes. So basically processing and creation of the volume that we want to analyze. And then the third part is then the annotation, so the segmentation, identification of the individual macromolecular complexes. And there, of course, we are using machine learning most of the time. So indeed, throughout all the steps, we are trying to implement software development. And this is a key part of the imaging consortium, where the work package of image analysis is actually interconnected to all the other work packages that individually develop X-ray imaging, EM, light microscopy. Also because, you know, whenever you try to combine multimodal imaging, well, you have to somehow overlap the two register one dataset onto the other, and often there are you know, modifications to the samples that occurred, aberrations of the microscopes or simply deformations of the sample. So this registration is at the moment one of the limiting steps, and again, image analysis can be fundamental for our ability to overlap the two datasets and therefore find with more precision the region of interest.
Okay, maybe somebody else has a question.
I think a lot of people ask the question that they are getting always this, let's say, mail list from EMBL, that there is, let's say, next year March, some new course on new imaging methods and so on, yeah? What does it mean, in fact, and which are the conditions to participate in this your 1 week short courses?
Yes, so the courses are quite diverse in terms of, apart from the method, but also the target of the audience. So for example, one technique I showed you multiple times over the slide is fib milling, this thinning down of the cell to do in situ cryo-electron tomography is a booming technique. And we are planning to have at least 2 courses every year. One dedicated to beginners, people that have never done that. So in a week, you will be exposed to the technologies that they will show you how to operate the microscope, how to get a lamella. So some level of hands-on experience to get you started. But the other course is actually aimed at experts, where they can already run those projects, but it's some sort of a workshop to really exchange knowledge on the tips and tricks, on the small details that make a big difference at the end. So usually courses are a combination of lectures and hands-on experience, which we always think it's pivotal for you to learn. On the other hand, I always advise to go for a hands-on course if you will then have shortly the possibility at home to apply that technique, because otherwise, if you learn something and then you don't apply for a year or two, most of it is lost. So we really when selecting candidates, we look for people that have running projects that could really benefit. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you should have then those devices at home. It means that you're ready to use them. So you come, you learn, and then you come again as a user to work with us to support your project.
Okay, that means, in fact, it can be imaginable that someone comes, let's say, 1 week for the course, and thereafter, for instance, 1 or 2 weeks stays in the Heidelberg, yeah, with EMBL. Why I am asking this? Because Latvia is eligible for all these twinning, teaming, RHRs projects in the widening program, the framework program, and they are usually the shortest term, but absolutely the shortest is 2 weeks, yeah, for a visit, yeah. And also in our next year will be this our mobility program from structural funds, so we are also discussing under no circumstances less than 2 weeks, but this is still in the discussion. Maybe we will request 4 weeks at least, yeah, not just visiting the courses, yeah. So I mean, EMBL is a good opportunity to combine this and fulfill various, let's say, conditions for participating in such opportunities.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, actually, I can tell you that the average stay to learn CLAM workflows is between 1 and 3 months. You really need time to first go through all the steps, but to repeat a few times, and then to metabolize, right, everything you're learning. So this is really the time frame we are looking for when we host someone to train them.
Okay, and of course EMBL has also some system of, let's say, guest house and guest hotel, and this is big advantage in Germany because, for instance, Erasmus students are always not very willing to go to the Germany, but well, to stay, yeah. In EMBL case, this problem is more or less solved, yeah. This you can then organize your stay at EMBL, yeah. Yes. So this is also a very important point. So more questions? Okay, yeah.
You mentioned imaging analysis capabilities and so on. So are they also remote possibilities to that I in my lab can access to this software and so on?
Yes. So what I showed you, the workflow from purified ribosomes to the final map and structural determination. This is what my service team supports, but I have to be honest with you, like my service team is 5 people, so we can usually support, to give you an idea, roughly 10 projects a year where we need to support the users with sample preparation and screening. When it comes to data acquisition, we can actually maybe support 100 people every year. For image analysis, maybe 2 or 3 every year. So this is simply because of the amount of commitment from our specialists to support image analysis. And for EM or tomography or CLAM, we support image analysis of those users that have done at least the imaging with us, so that we work on the data we collected together. We don't do that on data sets that have been collected outside. But this is my team, which is mainly dedicated to data collection and sample preparation support. The bioimage analysis group actually does what you are asking for, supporting bioimage analysis on data sets that you might have collected at home and you're just missing the expertise, or you want to have advice on how to best process your data. So this is something you can do either from remote or a posteriori after having collected data. Yeah. However, I mean, if possible, I think coming, it's always, I mean, it's more work for us because, yeah, there is some administration to do. No, we have to find the guest house space for you, but you learn so much more when you are on site, and especially you can establish a network between, at all level, PhD student, postdoc, group leaders. I think this is always highly beneficial. I mean, I actually, my first approach to EMBL was a master, as a master student, I spent 2 months there, and I just, that opened my eyes how science can be done, and that's why I applied for the PhD program. It's really nice to have the opportunity to come and visit. So if you do, take advantage of it.
Okay, many thanks. And I think finalizing also one remark that EMBL and EBC is not only Heidelberg, this is also European Bioinformatics Institute. It is a synchrotron, yeah, in Grenoble. It is Barcelona and Roma. Yeah, well, I absolutely have no idea what they are doing there, but they are also large facilities. For instance, in Roma, this is more for medicine, yeah. But of course, we cannot cover everything.